The billionaire spotted his former employee on the road, and what he discovered changed their lives forever by noon. The heat pressed down like a physical weight, flattening everything beneath it. The cracked asphalt, the brittle shrubs, the rusted metal of a forgotten bus stop that hadn't seen real shade in years. The wind carried sand in thin, stinging waves, as if even the air wanted nothing to survive there for long. Emily sat on the splintered wooden bench beneath the crooked metal roof, her back straight out of stubbornness rather than strength. Sweat clung to her temples. Her lips were dry enough to sting when she swallowed. Beside her, Aiden shifted weakly in her lap. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." His voice was small. Too small. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know, baby. The bus will be here soon." The lie tasted worse than the dust in her mouth. Aiden leaned his head against her chest. His curls were damp with sweat. His cheeks, usually full and bright, looked pale beneath the sunburn creeping across his skin. Emily glanced down the empty highway again. Nothing. No engine sounds. No movement. Just endless road stretching into a shimmer of heat. She adjusted her grip on him, trying to block the sun with her own body. They couldn't stay much longer. But she had nowhere else to go. Several miles down that same road, a black luxury SUV sliced through the heat waves like something untouchable. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly. The leather seats were cool. The dashboard glowed with quiet precision. Alexander Whitmore stared ahead, jaw tight. The meeting in Phoenix had been a waste of time. Investors pulling out, partners second-guessing. Too many questions, not enough backbone. He'd built his empire on control and predictability. Today had offered neither. He loosened his tie slightly, exhaling through his nose. The desert rolled past him in a blur of beige and silence. Then he saw it. A shape near the roadside. He almost didn't register it at first. Just a distortion in the heat. A bus stop. That didn't make sense. That line had shut down years ago. He would have kept driving. He should have kept driving. But as he passed, something tugged at his peripheral vision. A woman. And a child. His foot eased off the gas before his brain caught up. Don't. He drove another 100 yards, then stopped. The silence inside the SUV grew heavy. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The wind lifted strands of her hair. Something about the angle of her shoulders. The way she held the boy. Recognition hit like a punch to the chest. No. It couldn't be. He shifted into reverse. The SUV rolled back slowly until it aligned with the broken shelter. When he stepped out, the heat hit him like a wall. His polished shoes crunched against gravel. The woman looked up, and the world tilted. Emily. Her name moved through him like something unfinished. For a split second, neither of them spoke. Time folded backward, to polished marble floors, quiet hallways, and the night everything collapsed. "Alexander," she said finally. His name sounded different on her lips now, smaller, careful. He took in the details in quick, sharp flashes. The worn fabric of her dress, the cracked skin on her hands, the boy in her arms. The boy. Alexander swallowed. "Emily," he replied. Her gaze dropped briefly, pride flickering across her face before settling into something guarded. "You're far from the city," he said. "So are you." Aiden stirred weakly. "Mommy. Water." The word barely carried. Alexander's focus snapped to the child. "How long have you been out here?" "We're waiting for the bus," she said quickly. He looked at the empty road. "The bus?" She nodded once. Too fast. Alexander glanced at the faded route sign nailed crookedly to the metal pole. Something about it bothered him. The boy's lips were cracked, his breathing shallow. Without another word, Alexander walked back to the SUV, grabbed a cold bottle of water, and returned. He knelt slightly and held it out. Emily hesitated. Pride again. Then Aiden whimpered. She took it. Her hands trembled as she unscrewed the cap and pressed it to her son's lips. Aiden drank desperately, water spilling down his chin, soaking into his shirt. He didn't stop until the bottle was nearly empty. Alexander watched in silence. Heat, exhaustion. Possibly worse. "You can't stay here," he said. "We won't," she replied quickly. "The bus is coming." He studied her face. She wouldn't meet his eyes. A slow, cold realization began forming in the back of his mind. "Get in the car," he said. "That's not necessary." It wasn't a suggestion. The wind kicked up, rattling the thin metal roof above them. Aiden coughed. That decided it. Emily stood carefully, lifting her son, her movements slower than he remembered. Weaker. Alexander opened the passenger door. She hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The shift from desert heat to conditioned air felt almost unreal. Aiden sighed softly as the coolness touched his skin. Emily leaned back, closing her eyes briefly. Alexander drove. Silence filled the space between them, thick with history. He glanced at the rearview mirror, studying the boy. "How old is he?" "4. And his father?" The question slipped out sharper than intended. Emily's fingers tightened around the empty bottle. "He's not involved." "That wasn't what I asked." She stared out the window. "He doesn't know." Alexander frowned but let it drop, for now. Minutes passed. Then he reached for his phone and made a quick call. "David," he said when the line connected. "That old Route 47 bus line, when was it discontinued?" A pause. 3 years ago, came the reply. Alexander's jaw tightened. "You're sure?" "Positive. Budget cuts." He ended the call slowly. Emily hadn't moved. "You weren't waiting for a bus," he said quietly. She said nothing. "There is no bus." The words hung heavy in the air. Her shoulders finally sagged. "I thought maybe they'd restarted it." But they both knew that wasn't true. She hadn't been waiting. She'd been stranded. They drove in silence for several more miles before she spoke again. "You don't owe me anything," she said. He almost laughed at that. "You disappeared," he said instead. Her head turned sharply. "Disappeared?" "You were fired. You left. I never saw you again." Her expression shifted, something wounded flashing behind her eyes. "I was accused of stealing a diamond ring," she said carefully. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Samantha said she saw you take it." "And you believed her." The accusation wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I had no reason not to." She gave a hollow smile. "You had no reason to believe me either." He said nothing, because she was right. "I didn't steal anything," she continued. "But it wouldn't have mattered. She wanted me gone. And I let her do it." The admission settled between them. Aiden had fallen asleep now, his head tilted against the seat. Alexander stared at the road ahead, something uncomfortable rising in his chest. Guilt. Regret. Something heavier than either. After a while, Emily spoke again. "There's a town about 20 miles east," she said softly. "My cousin lives there. You can drop us off." Alexander nodded once. They approached an intersection. One road led east, the other west. Without hesitation, he turned the wheel. Emily frowned immediately. "That's not east." "I know." Her pulse quickened. "Alexander, where are we going?" He didn't look at her. "Home." The word landed like a shockwave. She straightened in her seat. "No, you don't have to." "I know." The mansion rose in the distance as the road curved. Her breathing became uneven. "You can't just take us back there." "I can." "Why?" This time he did look at her, because he had no logical answer, because he couldn't explain why the sight of her in that broken bus stop felt like something fate had placed directly in his path, because the desert didn't forgive weakness. But maybe he could. "You shouldn't have been out there," he said quietly. Her voice barely held steady. "And you shouldn't be bringing us back." But he didn't turn around. The gates of the estate came into view, and for the first time since he'd seen her on that roadside, Alexander felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Not obligation, not charity. Something else. something that felt like the beginning of a storm. The gates opened slowly. Emily hadn't realized she'd stopped breathing until the iron bars began to part, revealing the long private drive beyond. The estate rose in the distance exactly as she remembered. Tall windows reflecting the late afternoon sun, white stone glowing like something untouchable. Untouchable. That word had once defined her place there. Beside her, Aiden pressed his small hands against the window. "Mommy, is that a castle?" His voice carried awe, not fear. Emily swallowed. "No, sweetheart. It's just a house." But her pulse said otherwise. Alexander drove forward without hesitation. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as they approached the front entrance. The fountain in the circular driveway still ran in perfect rhythm, water arching elegantly as if nothing in the world had ever gone wrong there. For Emily, everything had gone wrong there. The SUV stopped. Before she could reach for the handle, the front doors opened. 2 staff members stepped outside automatically, trained to greet their employer. They froze when they saw her. Recognition flickered. Whispers followed. She felt it immediately. The weight of eyes, the quiet judgment, the memory of how she had left. 4 years earlier, she had walked down those same steps carrying a single suitcase, Samantha standing at the top of the staircase, cold and victorious. "You know what you did," Samantha had said. Emily hadn't defended herself. Alexander hadn't asked for her side. Security had escorted her out like she was a criminal. Now she was walking back in. Her legs felt heavier with each step. Aiden slid out of the car, staring up at the towering entrance. "Whoa!" His wonder cut through her humiliation. Alexander stepped around the vehicle and gave quiet instructions to the house manager. "Prepare the East Guest Suite and call Dr. Harris, immediately." The staff nodded and moved quickly. No one questioned him. No one questioned why she was there. That alone unsettled her. Inside, the cool air wrapped around them like a different world. Marble floors gleamed, chandeliers shimmered above. The scent of polished wood and fresh flowers lingered faintly. Aiden spun slowly in a circle. "Mommy, it's so big!" Emily tried to steady her voice. "Stay close to me." Alexander crouched slightly to Aiden's level. "Have you ever seen a staircase like that?" he asked, pointing toward the grand curved steps. Aiden shook his head, eyes wide. Alexander felt something shift in his chest at the sight of that expression. Not entitlement, not greed, just pure amazement. He stood and turned to Emily. "The doctor will be here in 10 minutes. "That's not necessary," she said automatically. "It is." There was no sharpness in his tone this time, just certainty. Dr. Harris arrived promptly, medical bag in hand. Aiden sat on the edge of the large guest bed, looking small against the pristine white sheets. Emily stood beside him, fingers brushing through his hair as the doctor examined him. Temperature elevated, skin flushed, mild dehydration. "Early stage heat exhaustion," Dr. Harris concluded. "You brought him in just in time." Emily's stomach tightened at the words, "just in time." Alexander stood near the window, arms crossed, listening carefully. "He'll need fluids, rest and monitoring tonight," the doctor continued, "but he should recover fully." Emily exhaled slowly, her knees nearly giving out from the release of tension. Alexander didn't comment on the consultation fee, didn't ask questions about cost. When Dr. Harris left, payment had already been transferred. Handled. Emily noticed. She always noticed. An hour later, Aiden was propped up in bed with electrolyte drinks and a light blanket. Color had begun returning to his cheeks. Alexander appeared in the doorway holding something small in his hand. "I thought you might like this," he said. Aiden's eyes lit up as he revealed a miniature remote control car. "For me? For you?" Emily stiffened slightly. "You don't have to buy him things." "It's not about buying him," Alexander replied calmly. Aiden carefully took the car as if afraid it might disappear. "Thank you, sir." Alexander hesitated at the word sir. "You can call me Alexander," he said. Aiden tested it. Alexander. It sounded natural. Too natural. Alexander sat at the edge of the bed while Aiden rolled the small car along the comforter, making quiet engine noises. "Do you live here all by yourself?" Aiden asked. "Yes." "Is it lonely?" The question caught him off guard. He glanced briefly at Emily before answering. "Sometimes." Aiden nodded thoughtfully, as if that made perfect sense. "You can play cars with me if you want," the boy offered. Emily watched the exchange carefully. There was no calculation in Alexander's expression, no performance, just a strange softness she had never seen before. When Aiden yawned, exhaustion finally winning, Alexander stood. "Get some rest," he said gently. As they stepped into the hallway, Emily spoke quietly. "Thank you. For the doctor." He shook his head once. "He's a child. It's basic." She studied him for a moment. Something was different, or maybe she had simply never seen this side before. That evening, after Aiden fell asleep, Alexander asked her to join him in his office. The room was exactly as she remembered. Dark wood shelves, floor-to-ceiling windows, order in every detail. She stood near the door, not sitting. "You don't have to hover," he said. "I'm not hovering." A pause. "I'd like you to stay," he said finally. Her shoulders stiffened. "As what?" "Not as a housemaid." The distinction was deliberate. "I need someone to oversee the Foundation's community outreach division. Someone who understands real need, not spreadsheets." She blinked, surprised. "You're offering me a corporate role?" "A structured position, fair salary, benefits, independent living quarters on the property if you choose, flexible hours." She didn't speak. "And Aiden comes first," he added. "Always." The words echoed in the quiet office. "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity. It feels like it." His jaw tightened slightly. "You earned your position here before, and I took it away without listening." The honesty landed heavier than she expected. "I'm correcting that." Silence stretched between them. "I need to think," she said. "Of course." She turned to leave. "Emily," she paused. "You don't owe me forgiveness, but you do deserve stability." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She left without responding. Near midnight, the mansion was silent. Emily sat on the edge of Aiden's bed, watching him sleep. The events of the day replayed in fragments. The desert, the gates opening, the doctor's words. Just in time. She stood to turn off the lamp. Aiden suddenly jerked awake, breathing hard. "Mommy!" She rushed to him. "It's okay, baby." "There was sand everywhere," he cried softly, "and you couldn't find me." Her heart twisted. She held him close, rocking gently. Footsteps approached. Alexander appeared at the doorway, drawn by the noise. Without asking permission, he stepped inside and knelt by the bed. "Aiden," he said calmly, "look at me." The boy hesitated but obeyed. "You're safe," Alexander continued. "No sand, no heat, just walls and doors and people who won't let anything happen to you." His voice was steady, grounded. Aiden's breathing began to slow. "Promise?" he whispered. "I promise." The word carried weight. Emily watched carefully. Alexander stayed until Aiden drifted back to sleep, his small hand unconsciously gripping the edge of Alexander's sleeve. Neither of them pulled away. When Alexander finally stood, their eyes met. Something had changed. Not obligation, not guilt. Something quieter, more dangerous. After he left the room, Emily remained still in the dim light. Her mind raced. The job, the protection, the way Aiden had responded to him, the way he had said promise. She stepped into the hallway and saw him at the far end, near the balcony overlooking the dark estate grounds. "Alexander," she called softly. He turned. She walked toward him slowly, her pulse uneven. "There's something you need to know about Aiden." The words trembled between them. He waited. She opened her mouth, then stopped, because once spoken, there would be no turning back. And for the first time since stepping back into that mansion, she wasn't afraid of the house. She was afraid of the truth. "There's something you need to know about Aiden." The words lingered in the quiet hallway, like a fragile thread pulled too tight. Alexander didn't move. The estate behind him was silent, the night pressing against the tall windows, moonlight stretching across the marble floors. "What is it?" he asked. Emily's fingers intertwined nervously. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times over the past 4 years. In every version, it ended with rejection. "The reason his father doesn't know about him," she began carefully, "is because he can't." Alexander's eyes sharpened. "No one can't know. That's a choice." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand. Then make me understand." The tension between them thickened. She drew in a slow breath, steadying herself. "The father doesn't know," she said softly, "because the father is you." The world seemed to stop. For a moment, Alexander thought he had misheard her. "That's not possible." "It is." His voice hardened. "We were never—" "Yes, we were." The memory hit both of them at the same time. 4 years ago, the night before Samantha's charity gala. Alexander had been drinking more than usual. His marriage had already begun to crack beneath the weight of public appearances and private betrayal. Samantha had accused him of being distant. He had accused her of being manipulative. The argument had been vicious. Emily had found him in the study later that night, alone, exhausted, raw. He had never looked at her the way he did that evening, not as an employee, not as invisible, just as someone who saw him. One conversation had turned into vulnerability, vulnerability into comfort, comfort into a mistake neither of them planned. It had happened once, and in the morning, everything had returned to order. Except, it hadn't. Alexander stepped back slightly now, as if the memory itself had physical weight. "You're telling me that one night?" His voice faltered. "Yes. And you waited 4 years to say something?" "You were married," she shot back. "Then you divorced. Then Samantha accused me of theft and had me thrown out before I could even process what was happening." His face darkened. "You should have told me. You would have believed her over me again." The words landed precisely where they hurt. Silence stretched. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the polished floor. "This is convenient timing," he muttered. Her eyes flashed. "You think I'd use my son as leverage? I think people lie when it benefits them." "And what benefit is there in this?" she demanded. "Do you think I enjoyed raising him alone? Do you think I'd choose that?" Her voice cracked, and that crack did more than her anger. He looked at her carefully, not as an ex-employee, not as someone beneath him, but as a woman who had survived something. "You're sure?" he asked finally, his voice lower. "I've always been sure." The air between them shifted from confrontation to something more fragile. "I want a test," he said. "I expected that." The DNA sample was taken the next morning. Aiden thought it was amusing. A quick swab inside his cheek while he giggled and asked if it was a game. Alexander stood nearby, outwardly composed, inwardly unraveling. If it was true, everything changed. If it wasn't, everything still changed. The wait felt longer than it was. 48 hours stretched like a week. Emily kept her distance during that time. Pride and fear warred inside her. Alexander buried himself in work, but his focus fractured constantly. He found himself watching Aiden differently, the way the boy tilted his head when thinking, the stubborn lift of his chin, the intensity in his gaze. Too familiar. On the second evening, the call came. Alexander took it alone in his office. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. He closed his eyes. The numbers echoed louder than any emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly before ending the call. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then something shifted. Not panic, not fear, resolve. By morning, lawyers had been contacted. documents prepared. Alexander moved with the same precision he used in business acquisitions, decisive, efficient, unshakable. But this was different. This wasn't about control. This was about responsibility. He entered the guest suite where Emily sat beside Aiden. "It's confirmed," he said simply. She searched his face for anger. She didn't find it. Instead, she saw something deeper. "I'm filing for legal recognition," he continued. "Aiden will carry my last name. There will be a trust fund established immediately. Education, healthcare, security, everything." Emily's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "Yes," he interrupted gently. "I do." Later that day, as paperwork was signed, Alexander wrote the name slowly. Aiden Whitmore. The ink looked permanent. It felt permanent. That afternoon, Aiden ran into the study while Alexander was reviewing documents. "Alexander," he called. Alexander turned in his chair. "Look what I built." The boy held up a crooked tower made of wooden blocks. Alexander smiled faintly. "Impressive." Aiden beamed. Then, without thinking, he said it. "Dad, can you help me make it taller?" The word hung in the air. Emily, standing in the hallway, froze. Alexander felt something inside his chest crack open. "Dad." Aiden's face shifted as he realized what he had said. "Sorry," he mumbled quickly. "I didn't mean." Alexander stood and crossed the room in 2 steps. He crouched in front of him. "You don't have to be sorry," he said, voice thick. For the first time in years, Alexander Whitmore felt tears threaten his control. He pulled Aiden into his arms, and he didn't let go quickly. The moment didn't last, because the front doors slammed open downstairs. The sound echoed through the house like a warning shot. Alexander stiffened immediately. He knew that energy. High heels struck marble with sharp precision. Samantha. She appeared at the entrance of the study moments later, dressed impeccably, fury radiating from her posture. "So it's true," she said coldly, eyes locking onto Emily first. "You crawled back." Emily straightened but didn't respond. Samantha's gaze shifted to Aiden. "And this must be the child." Alexander stepped between them instinctively. "Watch your tone." Samantha let out a humorless laugh. "You're legally claiming him? A child from your former housemaid?" Her voice dripped with disdain. "Careful," Alexander warned. She ignored him. "To think," she continued sharply, looking at Emily, "you played the innocent victim while sleeping your way into security." "That's enough," Alexander said, his voice dropping dangerously. Samantha's eyes flashed. "He's illegitimate," she snapped, "and you're destroying your reputation over her." The word hung heavy in the room. Illegitimate. Aiden clutched the hem of Alexander's jacket, confused. Alexander's control snapped, not explosively, but with chilling precision. "One more word," he said quietly, "and I release the financial audit from your foundation." Her expression faltered. He held her gaze steadily. "The one where funds mysteriously shifted accounts during our marriage." Color drained from her face. "You wouldn't." "Try me." The silence stretched, suffocating. Samantha recalculated quickly, as she always did. "This isn't over," she said finally, her voice lower now. "It is for today." She turned sharply and walked out, heels striking harder this time. The doors slammed again, but the air she left behind felt charged, not defeated, strategizing. Emily exhaled shakily. She won't stop. Alexander looked down at Aiden, who was still holding on to him. "No," he said quietly. "She won't." His eyes lifted to meet Emily's. "But neither will I." And for the first time since the truth had surfaced, the storm wasn't inside the house. It was coming from outside. And it was just beginning. The first headline broke at 6:12 a.m. By 6:20, it was everywhere. Billionaire Alexander Whitmore secretly fathers child with former employee. Emily saw it on her phone before she even finished pouring coffee. Her hands went cold. By the time she reached the dining room, Alexander was already on a call, his expression carved from stone. "Yes," he said evenly. "I'm aware." A pause. "No, we're not issuing a denial." Another pause. "We'll respond at noon." He ended the call and looked at her. "It was Samantha," Emily whispered. "Yes." The articles were carefully worded, not directly defamatory but laced with implication. Questions about power imbalance, speculation about timelines, anonymous sources suggesting scandal. Investors began calling, board members requested emergency meetings, and beneath it all, one detail repeated like poison: illegitimate child. Emily felt the walls closing in. "I should leave," she said quietly. Alexander's eyes snapped to hers. "No. If I go, this calms down. They'll stop attacking you." "They're not attacking me." She held up her phone. "They're questioning your integrity. They're questioning optics. That matters." He walked toward her slowly. "What matters," he said, voice controlled but fierce, "is that my son is not reduced to a headline." The word son still carried power when he said it. Emily's voice broke slightly. "You built everything. I won't be the reason it cracks." Before he could respond, a small voice spoke from the hallway. "Am I in trouble?" They both turned. Aiden stood there in pajamas, clutching the small toy car Alexander had given him. His eyes were wide. He had heard enough. Emily rushed to him immediately. "No, baby. Of course not." "But they're saying bad things," he said softly. "Is it because of me?" The question hit like a physical blow. Alexander knelt in front of him without hesitation. "Look at me," he said gently. Aiden did. "Nothing happening right now is your fault. Not one thing." "Then why are people mad?" Alexander chose his words carefully. "Because sometimes grown-ups care more about gossip than truth." Aiden's lower lip trembled. "If I go away, will they stop?" Emily gasped quietly. Alexander's expression changed, something final settling into place. "No," he said firmly. "You are not going anywhere. You belong here." The boy searched his face, then nodded slowly. Alexander stood and turned to Emily. "This ends today." By noon, every major financial outlet had picked up the story. At 12 p.m. sharp, Alexander stepped onto the stage of his company's press conference room. Cameras flashed immediately. Reporters leaned forward like predators scenting blood. Emily watched from a private monitor upstairs, her heart pounding. Aiden sat beside her, swinging his legs nervously. Alexander adjusted the microphone. "I understand there are questions regarding my personal life," he began calmly. "Let me answer them directly." The room quieted. "Yes, I have a son." A ripple of murmurs moved through the audience. "Yes, his mother was once employed at my estate." More whispers. "I did not know he existed until recently. That is my failure, not hers." The honesty landed heavily. "I have legally recognized my son. I am proud of him." No hesitation. No scandal. No coercion. No cover-up. Just a man who discovered he had a child and chose to step up. The phrasing was deliberate, measured, strong. Anyone attempting to weaponize my child's existence for corporate leverage will find themselves facing immediate legal action. A subtle warning. "And to be clear, I will not apologize for claiming my family." The final word echoed. Family. The room shifted. Not outrage, not collapse. Something else. Respect. By the time the conference ended, financial analysts were already reframing the story. Decisive, transparent, strategically controlled. The narrative began to turn. Not perfectly, but enough. Upstairs, Emily felt tears blur her vision. He hadn't protected himself. He had protected them. That evening, the estate felt different. Not tense. Resolved. Emily stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens when Alexander joined her. "It worked," she said softly. "It's working," he corrected. Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer heavy. "I meant what I said," he continued. About what? Claiming my family. The word made her chest tighten. You didn't have to make it public like that. Yes, I did. She turned to face him fully. Why? His gaze held hers steadily. Because I didn't stop on that road out of pity. Her breath caught slightly. I stopped, he continued, voice lower now, more personal, because I recognized you immediately, and because I never forgot you. The confession wasn't dramatic. It was steady, real. After you left, the house felt empty, he admitted. I told myself it was convenience, routine disruption, but it wasn't. She searched his face, looking for doubt. She didn't find it. I thought about that night more times than I should have, he said. And when I saw you in the desert, something in me knew I wasn't supposed to drive away. Emotion flooded her carefully built defenses. I was terrified, she whispered, of telling you, of coming back here. I know. And I still am. He stepped closer. I'm not. The simplicity of it made her laugh softly through tears. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe him. Not because he was powerful, but because he had chosen. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. Investors stabilized. The board quieted. Samantha attempted one final legal maneuver, a petition questioning the legitimacy of Alexander's corporate decisions under emotional influence. It was dismissed swiftly. Her leverage was gone, but her pride wasn't. Still, she retreated. And the estate, once filled with whispers, settled into something warmer. One afternoon in the garden where roses climbed along white stone arches, chairs were arranged in 2 simple rows. No media, no spectacle. Just close friends. A few trusted staff. A quiet officiant. Emily stood beneath the arch in a modest ivory dress. Not extravagant. Not staged. Real. Aiden stood proudly between them in a small suit, holding the rings with fierce concentration. Alexander looked at both of them as if committing the moment to memory. When the vows were exchanged, they weren't elaborate. They were promises. To protect. To choose. To stay. When it was time, Aiden stepped forward carefully, handing over the rings like a sacred duty. Don't drop them, he whispered seriously. Alexander smiled. I won't. As the officiant declared them married, applause filled the garden. Not loud, not overwhelming, just sincere. Alexander leaned down and kissed Emily softly. Not as an escape, not as a rebellion, as a beginning. Later, as twilight painted the sky in soft gold, Aiden ran across the lawn laughing, the small toy car still in his pocket. Emily watched him. You know, she said quietly, if you hadn't stopped that day, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life, Alexander replied. She leaned into him. The desert felt far away now. The broken bus stop. The heat. The fear. That place hadn't been the end of her story. It had been the moment everything finally began. Because sometimes the road that looks abandoned is the one that leads you home.